Jones is stripped of his light heavyweight title and is suspended indefinitely.
Jon Jones tested positive for Turinabol.
UFC star Jon Jones is being suspended.
He's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the sport.
Broke my heart, Jon Jones. Dude, you broke my heart.
The UFC's most dominant force. The man who has never been defeated inside the octagon, the youngest champion in history, the man who finally returned after a 3-year layoff to reclaim the throne, is now suddenly gone. Gone after nothing more than just a little announcement from Dana White himself in a press conference. No farewell, just a quiet goodbye. But as the truth unraveled, fans realized this wasn't a normal retirement. This was a smokescreen. And once you see what was really going on behind the scenes, you'll never look at his career the same ever again. In March of 2023, Jon Jones returned at UFC 285. Like he'd never left, over 1,100 days away from the cage, a new weight class, no tune-up fight, and still pure dominance. Ciryl Gane wasn't some fluke contender. He was athletic, he was technical, and a former interim champion. But against Jon Jones, he looked lost. One takedown, one transition, and a quick tap. Just like that, Jones proved he wasn't just the greatest light heavyweight, he was a force at heavyweight too. The MMA world buzzed, and all roads pointed to Stipe Miocic. GOAT versus GOAT, power versus precision, a legacy-defining clash that could settle the greatest debate in UFC history. It wasn't just about hype, it was destiny. But then nothing happened. Weeks turned into months, and there was no announcement, no press, no movement, just silence. The kind that doesn't feel accidental, because with Jon Jones, the silence usually means something bigger is brewing in the shadows. But while the hype for Stipe built to a fever pitch, the news that followed shattered that illusion. In October of 2023, UFC 295 was only weeks away. Jones versus Miocic, signed, official, and massive. Then, out of nowhere, Dana White dropped a video that nobody saw coming.
Jon Jones was training last night, got injured, he was wrestling, and he tore the tendon that connects your pec to the bone, off the bone. 8 months, gonna need surgery, he's out.
Just like that, 8 months gone, fans were stunned. Some were sympathetic, others were skeptical. There was no training footage, no rehab posts, and no updates from Jon himself, just a 10-second clip from Dana, and then radio silence. The UFC quickly pivoted to Tom Aspenol versus Sergey Pavlovich for the interim title. But something didn't feel right. Where was Jon? Why wasn't he addressing it himself? For a fighter with that much attention, the whole thing felt just a little too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from rest. It comes from damage control. Behind the scenes, something was off, and fans started to wonder, was this really just an injury, or was it a cover for something more chaotic? Because while the UFC scrambled to patch things up, the news cycle found something far more sinister. 3 days before that injury bombshell, something strange happened in Albuquerque. According to reports, officers arrived at the crash to find a woman in a front passenger seat, intoxicated and missing clothes from the waist down.
Oh, she has no pants. She said she has no pants.
No pants. Okay, that's fine. Can we ask what's going on?
She told police Jon had been the driver before he fled the scene on foot, while witnesses said he was drunk, possibly armed and aggressive. When officers called Jon, he refused to confirm his identity, he sounded drunk, and allegedly made threats towards the officers, including talk of employing lethal force through third parties.
They don't waste their cases with just killing you or petty crimes. But they definitely listen to conversations like this, and some of them are bored enough to kill you.
The cops believed that he was making serious threats,
Listen to me, man. He's making threats, and if he's making threats, I gotta call an officer.
possibly even suggesting someone else could hurt the woman if she talked. The charge itself was just a minor misdemeanor, but the optics were disastrous, especially coming from a man who was still technically the UFC heavyweight champion. While the car was totally destroyed and Jon was gone, no arrest, no charges, and no headlines, it should have been a scandal, a PR nightmare. Instead, it was a ghost story. Within 72 hours, Jones was injured and out of one of the biggest fights of his life. UFC fans didn't connect the dots, but local law enforcement had their suspicions because this wasn't the first time chaos followed Jon. The timing was too perfect and too clean. In a world where every moment is online, this whole story just vanished, and that's when people started whispering. Not about the injury, but about the escape plan. And right when whispers turned to questions, Jon made it official with just a few words. After Jon had silenced his critics with a flawless return against Cyril Gane, he had one of the last targets in sight, a legacy bout with rising star Tom Aspenol. Dana White said it was done and the fans were hyped, until suddenly Jon walked away. The MMA world froze, and on a quiet weekend, with no fights on the calendar, Jon posted a message that read kind of like a goodbye letter. He stated, "Today, I'm officially announcing my retirement from the UFC. This decision comes after a lot of reflection. No media tour, no press conference. Well, if you're not counting what Dana White said about it, just a sudden farewell, like someone was flipping the lights off on the biggest career in UFC history." And within a few hours, the real story started leaking out. New charges in New Mexico, a woman found half naked in a wrecked car, and Jon gone from the scene. Allegations of intoxication, threat, and violence, the kind of chaos only Jon Jones could generate, all dropped right after his retirement announcement. Fans had questions. Was it the injury recovery? Was he ducking Tom Aspenol? Or was this a legacy champ finally unraveling at the seams? Dana White didn't wait long. He confirmed what fans feared. The fight with Tom Aspenol was signed, and then Jon backed out.
The fight was done. We had the fight done a long time ago. So why he decided not to fight, you guys will have to ask him that.
Dana said that the fight was done, but that's where this story really begins, because Jon Jones didn't just retire. He walked away from a title defense, a super fight, and a contract, all while legal trouble and questions about his training started closing in.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying it since the beginning, and Jon Jones agreed to do the fight. So Jon Jones was offered the deal and accepted the deal.
For weeks, Dana White insisted the fight was happening. They were targeting a blockbuster showdown. Jon Jones versus Tom Aspenol. Young Lion versus the Aging King. A passing of the torch, or another reminder why Jon Jones was untouchable. And then silence. As Jones went dark, the UFC started pushing Canelo versus Crawford instead. And when Jon's tweet dropped, it didn't feel like a planned retirement, it felt like a retreat. That same day, news broke out of New Mexico. Court records showed that Jon Jones was facing a new misdemeanor charge. Leaving the scene of an accident, the incident had occurred back in February, but charges weren't filed until June, just hours before his announcement, and the report was pretty messy. However, this wasn't the first time that Jones vanished from a crime scene. Now, nearly a decade later, the pattern repeats itself. Back in 2015, he ran a red light in Albuquerque. He smashed into a pregnant woman's car, broke her arm, and fled on foot. That incident earned him felony charges and an indefinite suspension.
He was running the red light. I remember seeing him, and he kept going. He just hit me on my driver's side.
The fighter allegedly ran a red light while driving a rented Buick SUV last month at Wantabo Southern. Police say the accident ignited a three-car collision. The woman you just saw was the pregnant victim. Vanessa Sonnenberg, she suffered a broken arm.
After that, Jon was pulled from UFC 187. He got stripped and he came back a year later. Let's take a look at some of the dates. 2016, pulled out days before UFC 200 for failing a drug test.
Jon Jones was tested out of competition on December 4th. When he was tested, he tested positive for cocaine.
2017, knocked out Daniel Cormier at UFC 214. Then he pops for Turinabol and gets his title stripped again.
Jon Jones tested positive for Turinabol from a sample the day before your guys' fight, of course, at UFC 214 in July. The B sample just came back out yesterday.
2021, inducted into the Hall of Fame. Hours later, he was arrested for battery and vehicle damage. Every time he's at the top, he falls off the grid. Not once or twice, it had actually become a pattern, a cycle of self-destruction, public silence, and also strategic return. People used to call it bad luck, but after so many repeats, it feels more like a routine. When Jon's too close to greatness, something always yanks him back, and it's almost never from inside the cage. And while history repeated itself, one name kept rising through the ranks, and that is Tom Aspenol. While Jon Jones was recovering, Tom Aspenol exploded onto the scene. He flattened Sergey Pavlovich in 70 seconds and snatched the interim title like it was nothing. Aspinall wanted Jon so badly. He called him out at every press conference, and fans begged for the fight. Even Tom begged for it, but Jon was unbothered. He tweeted, "I've got nothing to prove against Tom Aspenol. Fighting him does nothing for my legacy. No interest, no back and forth, just a shutdown." Was Jon Jones ducking Tom Aspenol? Dana White didn't say it outright, but he didn't exactly shut it down either.
I'll just come out and ask you, do you think he's ducking Tom Aspenol?
No. Jon Jones never ducked anybody, and I think the reality is, whatever changed his mind with this fight, I don't know, you'd have to ask him that, but he's 38 years old, and I don't know.
The implication was clear. Jon said that he said no. And according to Dana, he was offered exactly what he deserved for the fight. So what exactly changed? Here's what we know. Jon supposedly went on a training trip to Thailand. Then he came back, walked away from the fight, not due to an injury, not money, he was just gone.
The UFC, I and Tom, we all got a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes. They're one of the biggest organizations in sports, and right now Tom and I have agreed to wait for the UFC to make their announcements.
Behind the scenes, people were whispering about how long it had been since Jon trained. Well, trained seriously, about how he needed 6 months to prepare for Tom Aspenol because he wasn't even in shape. They were speaking about how for years, Jon only trained when a fight was signed. The rest of the time, he didn't. Not even a little, not lightly, he didn't train at all. It wasn't a new behavior. Rogan and others had talked about this before, how Jones coasted on talent. He beat Alexander Gustafsson in 2013 after barely training. He once bragged that he beat Daniel Cormier while doing coke. That was the old Jon, but this Jon was 36 years old. He was no longer faster, younger, or hungrier than the next guy. This Jon was asking for 6 months just to survive a training camp, and Tom Aspenol wasn't waiting. Tom was young, explosive, undefeated in the UFC, except for one injury stoppage. He'd barely been out of the first round. He was cutting through heavyweight heavyweights like they were made of paper, and now, with the interim title belt in his hand, he was breathing down Jon's neck. Dana knew it, the fans knew it, and maybe Jon knew it too. This wasn't about fear, it was about risk, it was about reputation, it was about legacy. Because when you're 36, slowing down and staring down a guy that's 10 years younger than you, 10 times hungrier than you, and retirement is around the corner, well, things start to look like a smart play. But the UFC's silence on all of this, that raised even more questions. You see, the UFC didn't push back. They never questioned the injury, never challenged the retirement. Why? Because Jon Jones still sells. And Dana White isn't dumb. He knows a comeback sells even more. By letting Jon quietly retire, the UFC kept the brand intact. No messy headlines, no lawsuits, and no PR nightmare. Just a clean, silent exit and a door for return left wide open. Yet, while the UFC stayed quiet, something darker lingered just outside the spotlight. You see, that New Mexico incident never really went away. Local law enforcement sources claimed that a case was quietly opened, then quietly closed. No press releases, no court dates, just silence. There's speculation that Jon settled privately. Whether it was hush money, NDA agreements, or illegal wrangling, all the reports just vanished. The legal mess behind the scenes was never meant for public eyes, but it was real. And it was serious enough to pull the greatest fighter in UFC history out of the cage. Not for injury, not for age, but for survival. So he retired. Or more accurately, he hid in plain sight. And beneath all the mystery, one truth kept haunting the sport. Jon's legacy was at war with the reality. Jon Jones is greatness wrapped in chaos. Inside the octagon, he was unstoppable. The youngest UFC champion ever. He beat every legend thrown at him, and he made it look easy. But outside the cage, he was a storm of arrests, suspensions, failed drug tests, crashes, and allegations. The duality is existing. Fans don't know whether to cheer or cringe, and that's the real tragedy of Jon Jones. He never lost a fight, but he lost time, he lost credibility. Every time he climbed back to the top, he sabotaged himself once again. His retirement wasn't the end, it was just another reset. Because with Jon Jones, the career never really ends, it just pauses for damage control. So the real question now isn't what happened, it's what comes next. So, is Jon Jones really done? Well, according to his own coach, not quite. Jon's taking time. He's not closing the door, we'll see. That's code for if the money's right, he's back. If Stipe picks up the phone, Jon's in. If Tom Aspenol becomes too big to ignore, he might risk it. If Francis Ngannou returns from PFL or boxing, that fight, well, it's still on the radar. Jon isn't retired. He's dominant, waiting for the right moment, the right payday, or the right opponent to reset the story. Because if there's one thing Jon Jones has mastered, it's disappearing long enough to make the return feel like destiny. Jon Jones didn't retire because he was done. He retired because the chaos caught up again. And this time, it wasn't so easy to dodge. He's the most gifted fighter we've ever seen, and also the most unpredictable. And until that octagon door closes for good, Jon Jones is never truly gone. If you enjoyed this breakdown, then hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments, what do you think about this entire retirement situation? Let us know if you think Jon Jones will be back, and let us know if you think Tom Aspenol will ever get his opportunity. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.